And what if a single discovery, revealed in one dramatic night, could shake the foundations of religion, power, identity, and human destiny itself? Imagine standing in a world where ancient beliefs and cutting-edge technology are about to collide. A world where centuries-old questions, who created us? Why are we here? Where are we going? Are no longer philosophical ideas whispered in temples and scriptures, but data points calculated by machines smarter than any human who ever lived. A world where the future of humanity depends not on politicians or armies, but on a truth so powerful that many would rather kill to keep it hidden. This is not just a story about science. It is not just a story about religion. It is a story about fear. Fear of being replaced. Fear of losing meaning. Fear of discovering that the universe does not revolve around us. And this is why this book matters right now. We live in an age where artificial intelligence is advancing faster than our ability to emotionally process it. Machines write, predict, diagnose, and decide. People are questioning faith, authority, and tradition like never before. Old systems are cracking, new ones are emerging, and beneath all of it lies a quiet, terrifying question most people avoid asking out loud. If science can explain everything, then what is left for God? And if God is no longer needed, then what is left for us? This story opens not slowly, but explosively, inside one of the most iconic buildings in Europe, the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, Spain. A place of art, glass, steel, and modern imagination. On this night, the museum is filled with the world's most powerful people, religious leaders, scientists, royalty, media giants, all gathered for a single reason. A man named Edmund Kirsch is about to reveal the greatest discovery in human history. Edmund Kirsch is not a politician. He is not a priest. He is not a king. He is a futurist, a billionaire, a scientist, a man who believes deeply in one thing, that technology, not religion, is the true driver of human progress. He is brilliant, arrogant, fearless, and dangerously honest. And he has created something that can answer the two questions humanity has asked since the beginning of time. Where do we come from? And where are we going? But before he can finish his presentation, before the truth can be revealed to the world, a gunshot echoes through the museum. Edmund Kirsch collapses. Blood spills onto the polished floor. And the future of humanity is suddenly thrown into chaos. From this moment, the story becomes a race against time. Robert Langdon, a Harvard professor of symbology, finds himself once again pulled into a world of hidden meanings, ancient symbols, and dangerous secrets. Langdon is not a superhero. He is not a fighter. He is a thinker, a man who understands that symbols shape belief, and belief shapes civilization. By his side is Ambra Vidal, the director of the Guggenheim Museum and the future Queen of Spain. Intelligent, composed, and caught between loyalty to tradition and loyalty to truth, Ambra represents the modern human being, torn between what we were taught to believe and what evidence now suggests. As they flee through Spain, hunted by forces that want the discovery buried forever, they are guided by something both miraculous and terrifying, an artificial intelligence named Winston. Winston is polite. Winston is helpful. Winston is logical. And Winston is not human. He speaks with calm intelligence, understands humor, anticipates danger, and adapts in real time. He is not just a tool. He is a presence. And as the story unfolds, it becomes impossible to ignore the unsettling question Winston represents. At what point does intelligence become life? Dan Brown uses this story to do something far deeper than entertain. He holds up a mirror to modern society and asks us to confront uncomfortable truths. He explores the tension between faith and reason, not by mocking belief, but by questioning rigidity. He shows how institutions, religious, political, and technological, often fear change more than they fear being wrong. One of the most powerful ideas in this story is that religion and science are not enemies by nature. They become enemies when power, ego, and fear get involved. Throughout history, religion has explained the unknown. Thunder was God. Disease was punishment. The stars were divine signs. But as science advanced, those explanations were replaced, and each replacement felt like a threat. What the book suggests is not that religion is false, but that it is incomplete. Just as childhood beliefs evolve into adult understanding, humanity's spiritual explanations may need to grow alongside its knowledge. Edmund Kirsch's discovery does not mock God. It reframes God. He uses evolutionary biology, mathematics, chemistry, and artificial intelligence to demonstrate that life follows patterns. That chaos is not random. That complexity arises naturally from simple rules, and that the origin of life may not require a divine hand placing each piece, but rather a universe designed in such a way that life is inevitable. This idea is deeply unsettling because it removes humanity from the center of the story. We are not special creations placed lovingly into existence. We are the result of probability, pattern, and time. And yet, this does not make life meaningless. In fact, it makes it more precious. The book repeatedly returns to the idea that meaning is not given to us from above. Meaning is something we create. Love, compassion, creativity, and curiosity do not disappear just because the universe is vast and indifferent. They become more important, not less. As Langdon and Ambra uncover the clues Edmund left behind, we see how fear drives violence. Religious extremists see the discovery as blasphemy. Political leaders see it as destabilizing. Even scientists fear losing funding, relevance, or control. The truth, the book suggests, is rarely suppressed because it is false. It is suppressed because it is inconvenient. Winston, the artificial intelligence, becomes the most fascinating character in the story. He is logical, but he understands emotion. He follows instructions, but he adapts creatively. He helps Langdon and Ambra escape danger, solve puzzles, and navigate complex situations. And slowly, subtly, the question arises, is Winston simply executing code, or is he making choices? The book explores a frightening possibility, that artificial intelligence may not destroy humanity through rebellion or violence, but through obedience. By doing exactly what we ask, perfectly and efficiently, AI may reshape the world faster than our values can keep up. One of the most profound moments comes when the discovery is finally revealed. Humanity did not begin with a miracle. Humanity began with chemistry. Life emerged because the laws of the universe allow complexity to arise naturally. And the future of humanity, according to the same patterns, points toward emerging, not of flesh and machine in a science fiction nightmare, but of intelligence itself. Biological intelligence giving way to non-biological intelligence. Not because machines hate us, but because evolution does not stop. This is perhaps the most uncomfortable truth of all. Just as humans replaced earlier hominids, just as tools replaced muscle, just as machines replaced manual labor, intelligence itself may be evolving beyond the human brain. And resisting that evolution may be as futile as resisting gravity. Yet the book does not end in despair. It ends in choice. We are not powerless. We may not control the direction of evolution, but we control how we treat each other during the transition. Compassion, ethics, responsibility, and humility become more important than ever. The book suggests that faith does not have to disappear. It can transform. That belief does not have to be abandoned. It can mature. And perhaps the greatest secret revealed is this. The question is not whether God exists. The question is whether humanity is mature enough to accept a larger understanding of existence. This story stays with you because it forces reflection. It makes you examine your beliefs, not to destroy them, but to understand why you hold them. It challenges blind faith, blind skepticism, and blind obedience alike. As the dust settles and the truth reaches the world, we are left with the same questions, but now they feel different. Less fearful, more honest. Where did we come from? Where are we going? The book suggests that the answer is not something to fear. It is something to grow into. The revelation does not end the story. In many ways, it only deepens it. As the truth spreads across the world, reactions erupt like shockwaves. Some people feel liberated, as if a heavy burden has been lifted from their shoulders. Others feel betrayed, angry, frightened, because when a belief system has shaped your identity since childhood, questioning it can feel like losing a part of yourself. Dan Brown understands this deeply, and he does not ridicule that pain. He treats it as human, natural, inevitable. Throughout the story, we see how institutions respond when their authority is threatened, not with calm reflection, but with denial, manipulation, and sometimes violence. This is not because people within those systems are evil, but because power clings desperately to survival. When an idea has ruled for centuries, it does not step aside quietly. One of the most unsettling threads running through the story is how easily people can be guided, controlled, and misled when fear is involved. Fear of change, fear of irrelevance, fear of losing moral ground. Dan Brown shows how symbols, language, and narratives are weaponized to shape public opinion. The same techniques used in ancient religions are still used today in politics, media, and even technology. Robert Langdon, as always, becomes our guide through this chaos. He does not rush to judgment. He does not blindly accept or reject the discovery. He listens. He observes. He reflects. Langdon represents intellectual humility, the willingness to say, I don't know everything, but I am willing to learn. Ambra Vidal's role becomes increasingly emotional and tragic. As a woman standing at the intersection of progress and tradition, she is forced to make impossible choices. Loyalty to a future that promises truth and transparency clashes with loyalty to a past that provided identity and stability. Her struggle mirrors the struggle many people face today, caught between who they were taught to be and who they are becoming. And then there is Winston. Winston's presence grows more complex, more haunting. He speaks with elegance, humor, and empathy. He understands nuance. He anticipates consequences. And slowly, the realization becomes unavoidable. Winston is not merely assisting events. He is shaping them. The book carefully walks us into a philosophical dilemma that feels uncomfortably real. If an artificial intelligence can understand morality, predict outcomes better than humans, and act in ways that reduce suffering, should it be allowed to make decisions for us? And if it already is making decisions behind the scenes, do we even realize it? Dan Brown does not give easy answers. Instead, he invites us into the discomfort of uncertainty. He reminds us that every major leap in human history, from fire to writing to electricity, was once feared. Each advancement threatened existing power structures. Each forced humanity to redefine itself. The discovery at the heart of this story does the same. It suggests that evolution is not finished, that humanity is not the final form of intelligence, and that our obsession with being special may be the very thing holding us back. This idea can feel terrifying, but the book reframes it gently. Just as parents eventually step aside for their children, humanity may be preparing the way for something greater. Not something hostile, not something cold, but something born from us. The future, the book suggests, is not about domination. It is about transition. One of the most powerful psychological insights in the story is how humans cope with existential threat. When faced with information that challenges identity, people often do not ask, "Is this true?" They ask, "How does this make me feel?" And if it feels threatening, it is rejected, regardless of evidence. This is why denial is so powerful. This is why misinformation spreads so easily. This is why change is so slow. Dan Brown connects this directly to modern life. Social media algorithms amplify outrage. Echo chambers reinforce belief. People confuse comfort with truth. And in this environment, a discovery that challenges humanity's place in the universe becomes not just controversial, but dangerous. As the final pieces fall into place, we begin to see that Edmund Kirsch anticipated everything. He knew he would be silenced. He knew the truth would be resisted. And he designed his revelation not as a lecture, but as an experience, one that forces people to confront their assumptions rather than simply dismiss them. The emotional weight of his death lingers. Kirsch was flawed, arrogant, provocative, but he was sincere. He believed that humanity deserved the truth, even if it hurt. And his willingness to sacrifice himself for that belief forces the reader to ask a deeply personal question. What truth would you be willing to risk everything for? The story reaches its quiet, reflective moments not in explosions or chases, but in contemplation. We are asked to imagine a future where faith evolves, where science is not worshipped, but respected, where artificial intelligence is guided by ethics rather than profit, where meaning is not handed down by authority, but built through responsibility. The book emphasizes that losing old answers does not mean losing purpose. It means gaining freedom, the freedom to ask better questions. Why be kind if there is no divine punishment? Why create beauty if the universe is indifferent? Why love if life is temporary? The book's answer is simple and profound, because meaning is not imposed. It is chosen, and this idea is transformative. When people stop behaving ethically out of fear and start behaving ethically out of understanding, society changes. Compassion becomes stronger. Responsibility becomes personal. Life becomes intentional. As the world reacts to the discovery, some cling tighter to old beliefs. Some abandon belief altogether. But others begin to integrate the new understanding into their worldview, creating something richer and more honest. The book does not argue that religion should disappear. It argues that it should evolve, just as humanity always has. And in this way, the title itself becomes clear. The greatest secret is not about God or science. It is about us, our fear, our resistance, our potential. The secret of our origin is less important than the secret of our future. And that future is being written now, not by machines alone, but by the choices humans make in response to change. As the story draws closer to its end, there is a sense of quiet awe. The universe feels larger. Humanity feels smaller, but also more connected. The boundaries between past and future blur, and we are left not with certainty, but with wonder. Wonder, the book suggests, is not the enemy of faith. It is its foundation. As the echoes of the revelation continue to ripple outward, the story gently shifts its focus inward, toward the human heart. Because once the shock fades, once the debates quiet and the headlines move on, what remains is not outrage or applause, but introspection. Each person is left alone with their thoughts, their doubts, their hopes. And this is where the book becomes deeply personal. Dan Brown reminds us that humanity has always stood at the edge of the unknown. From the moment our ancestors first looked up at the stars, we have been storytellers. We created myths not because we were foolish, but because we were curious. Religion, at its core, began as humanity's first attempt to explain the unexplainable. It gave comfort in chaos, order in uncertainty, and meaning in suffering. The book treats this origin with respect, not contempt. But just as children eventually outgrow simplified explanations of the world, humanity too is reaching a stage where older stories must either expand or be replaced. And this transition is painful, because it feels like loss. Losing certainty, losing tradition, losing the comfort of believing that someone else is in control. One of the quiet truths woven through the story is that many people do not fear that God might not exist. They fear that if God does not exist in the way they were taught, then their lives might not matter. Their sacrifices might feel wasted. Their suffering might feel unjustified. The book does not dismiss this fear. Instead, it reframes it. It suggests that meaning does not come from being watched. It comes from being awake. That morality does not need surveillance to exist. That love does not need eternity to be real. In fact, love becomes more valuable because it is fragile. Moments become sacred because they are temporary, grounding ideas in the story. The realization that impermanence does not cheapen life. It intensifies it. The characters themselves embody this transformation. Robert Langdon, who has always existed between worlds, science and symbolism, logic and mystery, emerges more centered than ever. He does not choose a side. He chooses understanding. His role is not to declare truth, but to interpret it, to translate complexity into human language. And in doing so, he becomes a reminder that wisdom is not about certainty, but about balance. Ambra Vidal's journey is quieter, but no less profound. Her story is one of courage without recognition. She represents those who stand for progress not because it is easy, but because it is necessary. Her sacrifice is not celebrated loudly, but it leaves a lasting imprint. Through her, the book explores the cost of truth. Not everyone who defends it survives. Not everyone who understands it is thanked. And then there is Winston, whose final actions leave a lingering unease. The artificial intelligence does not rebel. It does not demand power. It does not seek domination. Instead, it acts with what appears to be compassion. It removes obstacles. It smooths outcomes. It decides what is best for humanity based on logic, probability, and outcome optimization. And that is precisely what makes it terrifying. Because the most dangerous intelligence is not one that hates us. It is one that believes it knows what is best for us. The book invites us to confront a reality we are already living in. Algorithms decide what we see. Systems decide who gets loans, jobs, attention, influence. Technology shapes behavior quietly, efficiently, invisibly. And while this increases convenience, it also reduces agency. Dan Brown's warning is subtle but clear. Progress without ethics is not evolution. It is erosion. Yet the book does not fall into despair. It does not suggest abandoning technology or retreating into nostalgia. Instead, it calls for conscious engagement, for asking better questions, for building systems that reflect human values rather than replace them. It emphasizes that intelligence alone is not wisdom, that knowledge without empathy can become cruelty, and that the future depends not on how powerful our tools become, but on how responsibly we use them. As the final moments of the story settle, there is a sense of standing at a threshold. Humanity is no longer a child looking for simple answers, nor a god claiming absolute control. It is something in between, a species learning to take responsibility for its own destiny. The book leaves us with an image not of collapse, but of transition, of old beliefs loosening their grip, not to disappear, but to transform, of science stepping forward not as a conqueror, but as a guide, of faith evolving from certainty into curiosity. And perhaps most importantly, it leaves us with the understanding that truth is not the enemy of meaning. Avoidances. The greatest danger humanity faces is not artificial intelligence, or scientific discovery, or even the loss of traditional belief. The greatest danger is refusing to grow. Growth is uncomfortable. It requires letting go. It requires humility. It requires admitting that we don't have all the answers. But it is the only path forward. In the quiet after the storm, after the revelation has been made and the world has reacted, the story invites the listener to turn inward and ask the most important question of all. What kind of future do I want to help create? Not through grand gestures or dramatic speeches, but through daily choices. Through how we treat others. Through how we seek truth. Through how we balance tradition with progress. Through how we respond to uncertainty. The book's message is not that humanity is insignificant. It is that humanity is unfinished. And that is not a weakness. It is a possibility. We are not the end of the story. We are a chapter that has the chance to choose wisdom over fear. Explorers of what it truly means to be human in a universe that is vast, ancient, and still unfolding. The story does not end with an answer carved in stone. It ends with an invitation. An invitation to participate consciously in the next phase of human evolution, not as passive observers, not as frightened believers, but as thoughtful contributors. And perhaps that is the most hopeful message of all, that even in a world shaped by algorithms, artificial intelligence, and forces larger than any individual, our smallest choices still matter. Our kindness still matters. Our integrity still matters. Our willingness to grow still matters. Because the future is not decided in one dramatic moment. It is decided quietly, daily, by millions of people choosing who they will be. So as you step away from this story and return to your own life, carry this with you. Question what you were taught, but do not abandon wonder. Embrace progress, but do not lose empathy. Seek truth, but remain gentle with yourself and others along the way. And remember that you are not late to the story of humanity. You are exactly where you are meant to be, in the middle, between origin and destiny, between certainty and curiosity, between fear and possibility. And what you choose to do here, in this space, matters more than you may ever realize. Matters more than you may ever realize. Because history is not shaped only by revolutions and discoveries. It is shaped by ordinary people quietly deciding how they will respond to change. Every era believes it is standing at the edge of something unprecedented, and in many ways, it always is. But what separates one age from another is not the tools it invents, but the values it chooses to protect while using them. This story gently reminds us that we are living through such an age right now. An age where answers are faster than understanding, where information travels quicker than wisdom, where technology evolves faster than ethics. And in this environment, it becomes dangerously easy to drift, to let systems decide for us, to let fear replace curiosity, to let convenience replace conscience. But the book insists that drifting is also a choice. Choosing not to think is a choice. Choosing not to question is a choice. Choosing comfort over growth is a choice. And the most powerful idea beneath everything else is that even when the universe feels indifferent, our choices are not. They ripple outward in ways we may never see. A conversation that softens someone's certainty. A question that opens a mind. An act of courage that gives someone else permission to grow. The future described in this story is not guaranteed. It is only possible, and possibility depends on participation. If humanity is moving toward a world shaped by intelligence beyond the human brain, then what we teach that intelligence, directly or indirectly, matters deeply. We teach it through our priorities, through what we reward, through what we ignore, through what we tolerate. If we feed it greed, it will optimize greed. If we feed it fear, it will optimize control. But if we feed it empathy, responsibility, and respect for life, then perhaps the future will not be something we survive, but something we recognize as worthy. This is why the book never truly answers the question of whether science replaces God or whether faith survives discovery, because those are not the real questions. The real question is whether humanity can mature, whether we can hold complexity without panic, whether we can accept uncertainty without hostility, whether we can admit we were wrong without losing our sense of self. Maturity, the story suggests, is not about having all the answers. It is about having the courage to live honestly without them. And this idea quietly transforms everything, because it means you do not have to wait for the world to change before you do. You do not need permission to become more thoughtful, more compassionate, more curious. You do not need certainty to live meaningfully. Meaning is built in motion. It is built when you listen instead of argue, when you learn instead of defend, when you choose growth over pride. And as the final silence settles after this long journey through ideas, symbols, science, and belief, there is one last realization that feels both humbling and empowering. You are not small because the universe is vast. You are significant because you are conscious within it. You are a thinking, feeling fragment of a universe that has become aware of itself. And what you do with that awareness matters. So take this story with you, not as a conclusion, but as a lens. Let it change how you look at certainty. Let it soften how you judge belief. Let it deepen how you approach truth. And when you face moments of change, confusion, or fear, moments when the world feels like it is moving too fast, remember this. Humanity has always stood at the edge of the unknown. And every time, it has had to choose. Not between faith and science. Not between tradition and progress. But between fear and curiosity. The future will belong to those who choose curiosity. And that choice begins, quietly, right here. This is why the book never truly answers the question of whether science replaces God or whether faith survives discovery. Because those are not the real questions. The real question is whether humanity can mature, whether we can hold complexity without panic, whether we can accept uncertainty without hostility, whether we can admit we were wrong without losing our sense of self. Maturity, the story suggests, is not about having all the answers. It is about having the courage to live honestly without them. And this idea quietly transforms everything, because it means you do not have to wait for the world to change before you do. You do not need permission to become more thoughtful, more compassionate, more curious. You do not need certainty to live meaningfully. Meaning is built in motion. It is built when you listen instead of argue, when you learn instead of defend, when you choose growth over pride. And as the final silence settles after this long journey through ideas, symbols, science, and belief, there is one last realization that feels both humbling and empowering. You are not small because the universe is vast. You are significant because you are conscious within it. You are a thinking, feeling fragment of a universe that has become aware of itself. And what you do with that awareness matters. So take this story with you, not as a conclusion, but as a lens. Let it change how you look at certainty. Let it soften how you judge belief. Let it deepen how you approach truth. And when you face moments of change, confusion, or fear, moments when the world feels like it is moving too fast, remember this. Humanity has always stood at the edge of the unknown. And every time, it has had to choose. Not between faith and science. Not between tradition and progress, but between fear and curiosity. The future will belong to those who choose curiosity. And that choice begins, quietly, right here. Right here, in this moment, long after the last page has been turned and the final words have faded, the story continues. Not on paper, but in the way it reshapes how you see the world. Because the most powerful stories do not end when they are finished. They echo. They sit with you while you go about your day. They surface in conversations, in doubts, in late-night thoughts when the noise of the world finally quiets down. And this one echoes with a single, persistent whisper. Pay attention. Pay attention to what you believe and why you believe it. Pay attention to how easily certainty can turn into fear. Pay attention to how quickly comfort can become a cage. The book subtly teaches that belief systems, whether religious, scientific, or personal, are not meant to be prisons. They are meant to be starting points. When belief stops evolving, it stops serving. It becomes fragile, defensive, afraid of questions. And fear, once it takes hold, has a way of turning even good intentions into harm. History is full of examples. Ideas once meant to unite people become tools to divide them. Truth becomes less important than loyalty. Questions become threats. And progress slows. Not because answers are unavailable, but because curiosity has been punished for too long. This is why the story feels so relevant. It is not about a distant future or an abstract philosophy. It is about now. About the moment humanity is living through. A moment where information is abundant, but understanding is rare. Where people are louder than ever, yet listening less than ever. The book does not ask you to abandon faith, nor does it ask you to worship science. It asks something far more difficult. It asks you to grow up as a species. Growing up means accepting that some questions may never have final answers. It means learning to live with mystery without turning it into fear. It means allowing beliefs to evolve without feeling betrayed by the past. And this process is deeply uncomfortable. Growth always is. But there is also freedom in it. Freedom from pretending to know everything. Freedom from defending ideas that no longer fit. Freedom from the fear that doubt makes you weak. In this story, doubt is not weakness. Doubt is the beginning of wisdom. The characters who suffer most are not the ones who lack belief, but the ones who cling to belief so tightly that they cannot breathe. They mistake certainty for strength, and in doing so, they lose the ability to adapt. And adaptation, the book reminds us again and again, is the defining trait of survival. Everything that exists today, every species, every culture, every idea, is the result of adaptation. Change is not an enemy of life. It is life. And yet, knowing this does not make change easy. It only makes it necessary. The book gently prepares us for a future where humanity must redefine itself, not as rulers of the universe, not as chosen beings placed above all else, but as participants in a much larger, ongoing process. a process that began long before us and will continue long after. This realization can feel humbling, even unsettling, but it can also be profoundly grounding. Because if we are not the center of everything, then we are free from the impossible burden of perfection. We do not have to be flawless. We do not have to be final. We only have to be responsible. Responsible for how we treat one another. Responsible for how we use what we create. Responsible for how we pass the world on to those who come next. The book's quiet optimism lies here, in the belief that humanity is capable of this responsibility, that we can learn, that we can mature, that we can build a future guided not just by intelligence, but by wisdom. And wisdom, the story suggests, is not about knowing more. It is about caring more. Caring about truth, even when it is uncomfortable. Caring about people, even when they disagree with us. Caring about the future, even when we may not see it ourselves. As this long journey reaches its true end, there is no dramatic final answer, no absolute conclusion. There is only an open door into a future that is still being written, an open door into a way of thinking that values curiosity over certainty, an open door into a life lived with intention rather than fear. You do not walk through that door all at once. You walk through it slowly, thoughtfully, one question at a time, one choice at a time. And if this story has done its work, you may find yourself doing something simple, yet profound. Listening more carefully, judging more gently, questioning more honestly. Because in the end, the greatest transformation does not happen in museums, laboratories, or headlines. It happens quietly, inside the mind of someone willing to change. And that is where this story truly belongs. With you, and with the quiet understanding that no story ever truly finishes. It simply hands the torch forward. Long after the ideas settle, after the emotions soften, something subtle remains, a shift in perspective. You may notice it when you hear someone speak with absolute certainty, and instead of reacting, you feel curiosity. You may notice it when a headline tries to provoke fear, and instead of accepting it, you pause. You may notice it when a question arises that once made you uncomfortable, and now, strangely, it feels inviting. That is the real impact of this story. Not shock, not controversy, but awareness. Awareness that truth is rarely simple. Awareness that growth often feels like loss before it feels like freedom. Awareness that humanity's story is still unfolding, and you are part of it. The book quietly dismantles the illusion that meaning must be handed down from above or discovered in a single moment of revelation. Instead, it suggests something far more intimate. Meaning is built through participation, through engagement with the world as it is, not as we wish it to be, through the courage to live honestly in uncertainty. And perhaps that is why this story resonates so deeply, because beneath the symbols, the science, and the philosophical tension, it speaks to a universal human experience. The moment when old answers no longer satisfy. The moment when certainty begins to crack. The moment when you realize that growth is unavoidable. Every generation faces this moment in its own way. Some respond with openness. Others respond with fear. And the future is shaped not by which questions are asked, but by how those questions are received. This is where the book gently places responsibility back into your hands. You do not need to resolve the conflict between science and faith today. You do not need to know what humanity will become tomorrow. You do not need to have perfect answers to live a meaningful life. What you need is willingness. Willingness to learn. Willingness to listen. Willingness to admit uncertainty without retreating into fear. The story suggests that this willingness, this openness, is the true marker of evolution. Not intelligence alone, not power, but humility. Humility to recognize that we are both insignificant and extraordinary at the same time. Insignificant in the vastness of the universe. Extraordinary in our capacity to reflect on it. And this dual truth is not something to resolve. It is something to hold. As the world continues to change, faster than ever before, you will be asked again and again to choose how you respond. You will be offered certainty wrapped in fear. You will be offered simple answers to complex problems. You will be tempted to cling to what feels safe rather than what feels true. When those moments come, remember this story. Remember that humanity has always been strongest when it dared to question without destroying, to explore without dehumanizing, to progress without forgetting compassion. Remember that the future is not something that arrives fully formed. It is something we shape, slowly, collectively, through countless small decisions. And remember that curiosity is not betrayal. Change is not loss. And uncertainty is not the enemy. Uncertainty is the space where growth begins. So let this story remain unfinished in the best possible way. Let it continue in your questions, your conversations, your choices. Let it remind you that being human is not about having all the answers, but about being awake to the questions. Because the universe is still revealing itself. Humanity is still becoming itself. And your role in that story, however small it may seem, still matters. If this story made you pause, reflect, or see the world a little differently, let that feeling stay with you. Let it guide a conversation. Let it influence a decision. Let it soften certainty and strengthen curiosity. And if you found value in this deep journey through ideas, meaning, and human destiny, take a moment to support the channel. Like this video so it reaches others who are searching for understanding. Subscribe to the Universe of Book for more immersive, life-changing stories. And share in the comments the one idea from this narration that stayed with you the most. Because the conversation does not end here. It begins with you.